Hello and welcome to the British Sitcom History Podcast. My name is Gareth and with me as always is Alan.
Hello.
And today we are revisiting Blackadder. We're doing Blackadder II.
Yes, part 2 of at least 4, I'd say.
Yeah.
Possibly 5 or 6.
Well, this is interesting because we've done a couple of episodes where we've tackled a sitcom, Only Fools and Horses, Red Dwarf, for example, where we've not tackled the whole thing.
Just because they're so big and they change over time.
Well, I mean, today is evidence that there's plenty of to talk about with Blackadder 2. It's completely different to Blackadder 1. And we're going to tackle a specific episode, as always. We're going to look at the first episode, Bells. But before we get into that episode, why don't we focus on that? Why don't we focus on the changes from Blackadder 1 to Blackadder 2?
Yeah, so just in case anyone is listening to this wants to go back, we have done an episode all about Series 1 of Blackadder. We've done that on the podcast before, so go and listen to that if you want.
Oh, I tell you what, before we go any further, we should also say a good companion piece to this will be our podcasts on the Thin Blue Line, because we talked about Rowan Atkinson and Ben Elton then as well. So that's probably worth a listen as well.
Yes, and so for those reasons, we probably won't go into so much detail on some of the actors here, because we've kind of already done it. But we'll set the scene, and nonetheless, because the first Blackadder, and we sort of dealt with this when we looked at it. It's the red-headed stepchild of the series, isn't it? It's kind of the one that it didn't quite work as well as the others, and so it's not as well remembered. But I think when we went back to it, we found certainly there was definitely a lot to like.
Yeah, I enjoyed it more than my memory had enjoyed it, if you see what I mean. I enjoyed it more than I remembered enjoying it back in the day. But when we talked about the first Blackadder, it was very much a vehicle for this rising star, Rowan Atkinson, and it was a big budget production. There was a lot of money spent on it, and it was seen as a bit of a flop.
Yes, because they sort of deliberately went away from traditional sitcom format and went for this quite lavish historical epic style that was popular at the time in drama. And so they were, let's just do that, but let's make it silly. Great idea, but more expensive than a normal sitcom because you're not shooting it in a studio, it's all on location, loads of extras and stuff. And so if it's going to work, that budget, it needs to be really successful. And it wasn't. It just wasn't that great. Gets cancelled, job done, move on.
So how much time passed then until this Blackadder 2 came along?
Well, Blackadder 1 went out in 83. Blackadder 2 went out in very early 86.
Oh, wow, okay.
However, it was filmed about 6 months previous to that, but they just held on to it for a while. So a couple of years, a good 2 years between the two, which isn't that long, really, in the grand scheme of things.
No, it's not actually. When you put it like that, it's not that long at all, really. Especially as the story that I've told myself is Blackadder 1 was this massive flop, and it was never going to be recommissioned, and yet here we are 2 years later.
Yes, and I guess the idea as well is, okay, that didn't work, let's all move on. So why come back to the pot? Especially if you're going to change it so dramatically that why not just create a new show, right? Well, obviously there was something there they liked. They all liked working together. That was definitely part of it. These people all clicked.
Yeah.
Well, Rowan Atkinson, obviously, he was a writer on the first series. And now Rowan Atkinson is a man who has not made a great living as a writer. He's a performer. Primarily, he's done a fair bit of writing in his time, but it's not really his thing. And I think the failure of the first series really knocked his confidence in terms of that as a writer. And I think perhaps it was also like, okay, I wasn't happy with my performance and what I was doing with the character because I wasn't focusing on that. I'm trying to do too many things at once. So I think Rowan Atkinson really made a deliberate choice like, yeah, this isn't me. I'm an actor. I'm a performer. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but the rehearsal room was like everyone was chipping in with ideas and blah, blah, blah. But basically, we need someone else to churn the scripts out.
Who would you possibly get to churn scripts out?
Well, Richard Curtis was the other writer with Rowan Atkinson. Now, we did a bit of a deep dive on Richard Curtis last time we talked about Blackadder, so do go back and listen to that. But he's basically a posh Oxbridge boy, and he knew all these guys. He basically came through that same system, knew Rowan Atkinson at university. Oh, here's something I discovered, Gareth, which we talked about in our last Blackadder episode. We were talking about Tim McInerney.
Tim McInerney. Sorry, say that again.
Tim McInerney?
Tim McInerney. Well, we had this last time, didn't we?
I can't. Even when I know how it's pronounced, I still can't get my mouth around it. Anyway, so we talked about Tim McInerney last time and said, oh, well, he doesn't seem to be part of this, the comedy lot, the Oxford comedy lot. But he's just a straight actor who was brought in.
Yeah.
I have discovered since him and Richard Curtis, best mates at uni at Oxford. So they were really good mates.
Clicks in. I
so
see. That's very interesting. Okay.
But we talked about that because Tim McInerney is not particularly a comedy specialist. He was just a straight actor. He seems to be quite a classic, dramatic actor.
Yeah. So we got Richard Curtis, and of course they brought in Ben Elton.
So how did that happen? Right, I'll tell you how. Obviously, they're all kind of bubbling along in the comedy world at the time. Ben Elton's on the up because of the young ones particularly, but obviously he was just generally on the up. And there was a series called Al Fresco, which was a sketch comedy series.
It's a sketch show, yeah.
It was basically ITV's answer to Not the 9 O'Clock News. They pulled in Fry and Laurie and Emma Thompson.
Robbie Coltrane was in that?
Robbie Coltrane was in it,
yeah.
And they brought in Ben Elton to be a writer. Now, the reason that happened was because they wanted Rick Mayall in. They basically got the Cambridge Footlights. It was Fry and Laurie, Emma Thompson, and that class, the Tony Slattery was there as well. Yeah. It was like the best Cambridge Footlights we've had since, Monty Python. And so they were making a big deal out of it. But they were like, okay, well, let's throw in a bit of alternative comedy. That's the up-and-coming thing. It's the early 80s. So they went to Rick Mayall, who was the new big name in alternative comedy.
Yeah.
He told them to shove it.
Oh, really?
But yeah, he was like, I'm not interested in working with a bunch of toffs. But he says, but you should talk to my mate Ben Elton, who loves working with toffs. Yes. and so Ben Elton went and started to write for Al Fresco. So that's how he kind of got connected with Fry and Laurie and that kind of kind of circle.
I see. Networking, Alan, very important.
Yeah. Anyway, so here's the thing I just found out doing research for this, which I did not know. Richard Curtis and Ben Elton worked together for the first time on a pilot for a sitcom that was based around Madness, as in the pop Madness? Group Madness. Yeah,
right.
Of course, they'd been in the Young Ones, a little guest appearance in the Young Ones, but they wanted to do like a kind of Monkees style, band at home, just hanging out together, kind of
being all mad and that.
Yeah. And they did a pilot apparently, which just didn't do any good. So that was that, really. But if you think in terms of, okay, the Young Ones has just happened, an anarchic madness in a house, just living together, and they're doing wacky things, you can kind of see that.
Yeah,
can't
you can see that.
Sort of see where they're doing. Anyway, that didn't work. But Richard Curtis and Ben Elton, they got on really well. They're quite different personalities, but they click. They want to work on something else. And Ben Elton basically goes, you know what you should have done with Blackadder, right? You should have filmed it in front of a studio audience. Do it like a proper sitcom, because it would.
Ben Elton loves a proper sitcom, doesn't he?
He does. Yeah, we talked about this when the Thin Blue Line was a great example of that, of his work.
Old-fashioned sitcom.
The Upstart Crow, much more recent, like that. That's very classic in front of a studio.
No, Upstart Crow. I've heard him talk about this. Upstart Crow was sort of, what was that, 2017, 18, that kind of time, and it was a very deliberate throwback to the style, pre-Office style.
I mean, God, there's a character in it where the guy's just doing a David Brent impression. Way too on the nose, but whatever. We'll do Upstart Crow.
We'll discuss that another time.
Get into it. But so basically Ben Elton was like, yeah, this is what we should have done. And so they went, shall we do it then? Shall we have a crack at that? And they kind of sat down and retooled it. And
that's interesting. So we were just talking a minute ago about why did they get back together? I think that might be the answer, because we've talked about Ben Elton before. He's the worker bee. He's the guy who gets shit done. Yeah. And that's probably what happened. He came along and said, let's do this. And everyone was like, yeah, good idea. Let's do it.
Yeah, I'm not, yeah, probably some truth to that. He does like to make stuff happen, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So we reinvent the show. We time slip it. Yeah, we make it into a completely different time period, a couple of 100 years down the line.
About 100 years down the line.
Yeah, in fact,
not to be a pedant, but that is my role.
This character of Blackadder is the great-grandson of the Blackadder from...
Is that stated somewhere? I didn't know that.
It is. So in the end credits, which perhaps we'll talk about in more detail later, there's a little minstrel who sings a song, and in one of the end credits, it says something like, his great-grandfather was the king, but only for about 30 seconds. It's sort of a deliberate reference to it. So yes, I don't know how quite official that is, but yes, that's the idea.
That's canon, mate. That's canonical.
Yes. So we pare down the principal characters. We get down to our three main cohort, which is Blackadder, Percy, and Baldric.
So they all survive in terms of their names. They all survive, and the actors indeed. They all survive from the first series, but they are very different.
Yes, but they are repositioned, and this again is Elton's influence. So he was the one who was like, yeah, all the physical clowning stuff, it's fine, but yeah, I prefer to see Rowan doing the words. He's such a linguistic thing. He loves it. I want to put words in his mouth. I want to have that kind of... And he should be the Machiavellian kind of genius behind this all.
Yeah.
And the other big influence Ben Elton had, that he looked at Rowan Atkinson and saw something that apparently others didn't, when he was like, this guy's sexy. This guy is just... He's got a confidence. Look at the sexy women he's dating. And let's make Blackadder sexy.
Blackadder II is sexy. There is absolutely no doubt about that.
Absolutely. And I think that doesn't come naturally to Rowan Atkinson. I think if he's writing something for himself, he's not going to write that. So that's part of it. But he is, and interestingly enough, in terms of Rowan Atkinson being a sexy man, it was during the filming of this series that he met a young makeup artist who would later become his wife. And for many, many years, and they have a child together. They've split up now and he's married to someone like 30 years younger than him, but they did have a good... they had a solid 20 years.
We all move on.
Well, I think, whatever Ben Elton saw, it works, doesn't it? We have this new Blackadder. He's the clever one and he's the sexy one.
Yeah.
That means we have to facilitate the other characters around him. So... Percy becomes a sort of a posh twit fool, which he kind of was anyway.
But now he seems more so because of the contrast with Blackadder, whereas they were both fools. Now Blackadder is the all-knowing Machiavellian character. It makes Percy look a lot dimmer.
Yes, and Baldric, of course, becomes the fool, the absolute idiot.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and he is a real idiot, In contrast, in the first series, of course, he's sort of there whispering ideas into his lord's ear, whereas now he's completely vacant.
And the evolution of Baldric is quite an interesting one, which I think maybe we'll have to deal with at some point in the future when we talk about the later series. But just as a kind of my throwaway opinion, I think by the end he's just an idiot, and it kind of loses a lot of character because it's just I'm doing the lines like a stupid idiot. That's a little bit dismissive. Tony Robinson brings a lot to what could be a very simple role. But I think here, in Blackadder II, there's still those vestiges of personality and character there, as opposed to just being a fool.
Baldric, are you suggesting that I become a rent boy?
Oh, good-looking bloke like you, posh accent, nice legs, can make a bomb. Just stick a pink carnation in your hat and... make the old sign.
I'd rather die.
Oh, fair enough. That's all right. Then I'll just put the kettle on while we wait, shall I?
And I know from Tony Robinson's point of view, he deemed that an improvement as he went along. Like he was scaling back any kind of intelligence there and was happier with it as it went along. But I don't know. I think I prefer it here. By the way, I have, since we last spoke about Blackadder, I've read Tony Robinson's autobiography, so that's where I've got some of this information from.
Do you want to give it a little plug?
Tony Robinson, it's called No Cunning Plan. My Unexpected Life from Baldric to Time Team and Beyond. So, you got all your buzzwords in there if you're searching for that, all your hashtags. But yeah, it was great, actually. It was really interesting. It was because he started acting as a child. He was in Oliver as a child on the professional stage.
We saw him in The Rag Trade, didn't we? Do you remember we saw him in the 70s remake of The Rag Trade?
Only in the pilot of one of the remakes of The Rag Trade. He didn't make it to the series. Christopher Beanie was in the series. But yes, Tony Robinson... We talked about him before on the last episode. We went into more detail on his career. But should we catch up on what he was doing between the first series and second series of Blackadder?
Well, that's a good idea. If we've got 2 or 3 years in between the two, I'm sure they all didn't just put their careers on hold and wait. Well, what were they up to?
Well, Tony Robinson was probably the busiest out of any of the people here. Rowan Atkinson was the next big thing anyway. So was Richard Curtis and the John Lloyd. Like, they were all on their way. They were doing other things. Whereas Tony Robinson, this was a bit of a break for him. It kind of made him much more recognised on TV and stuff like that. He was a solid working actor before that. So he managed to get some more work immediately out of it.
I don't think that comes automatically, though. You know, we've seen lots of these sitcoms where, like, maybe the third or fourth name on the cast list just then disappears into obscurity.
The opportunities have to be there. Sometimes right place, right time. But you've got to go and get them. But Tony Robinson, his big thing after this was the sketch show Who Dares Wins.
Now I remember Who Dares Wins. That's just at the earliest point in my television watching life.
And he was a regular in that. He was just one of the sketch show regulars who was brought in. It's the likes of Jimmy Mulville, Rory McGrath. If anybody's seen the sitcom Chelmsford 1, 2, 3, that was the same creative team who'd made Who Dares Wins. Yeah, Philip Pope was part of that team who makes a guest appearance in Blackadder II as well. So, that was a lot, and that was a pretty successful sketch show. It ran for a good few years, and he was a big part of that. He did a little guest spot on The Young Ones as well. He did a little bit in that, a few other bits and pieces. But as we talked about before, Tony Robinson's legacy these days is not really as an actor, is it? He became a presenter more than anything else.
Celebrity archaeologist.
Yeah, exactly. But he never stopped acting, and he did carry on doing bits and pieces. And Maid Marian and In Merry Men, we talked about that as well. That was his other big thing. But yeah, throughout the 90s, he was the old archaeology game. Which, now I've read his autobiography, Gareth, I can give you a bit more information on that, because we talked about that last time, and we're like, how the hell did he end up in that? He just had a bit of an interest in archaeology, and him and his wife went to an archaeology holiday where get to have a go at a bit of archaeology. And he met the scruffy looking one with the hat. He met him.
I've never watched Time Team.
you don't know anything. Well, anyway, he met him and they were like, oh, this is good. You're Baldrick off the telly, aren't you? And then they just kind of stayed in touch. And so somewhere along the line, Tony Robinson was like meeting with a producer and kind of someone said, like, if we do something about archaeology, we heard you're interested in it. Do you want to present it? And he was like, oh, not really, but maybe actually that's not a bad idea. And so it was a bit of a guy. A bit of kind of this here and that there. It wasn't like his idea to do it, but also when he was approached, it wasn't like completely cold. He had the interest. Right. So, yeah, it seemed to be one of those organic things that came from it. Also, in the meantime, between series, Rowan Atkinson, he was the next big thing in comedy. And this was his first kind of big failure at the Blackadder.
Where did Not the 9 o'clock news come? Was that still going on in that period?
No, it was finished.
Was that finished by then?
By then, about 82, 83.
So what did he do then?
Well, not a great deal. If you look at his IMDb, there's not like a lot happening in between this. He was in Never Say Never Again, the unofficial Bond film, of course.
Yes, I've seen that.
But he was on the theatre. He was in a theatre show called The Nerd on the West End. And so... he's doing that for quite a while. If we're talking about this in real terms, this is probably a couple of years we're trying to deal with. So that's a year, really, in terms of rehearsals and performances and that sort of thing. But, no, I couldn't find anything really obvious like that's what he was doing. I suspect he may have been out doing a bit of stand-up. He was never quite a stand-up, but he would do sketch comedy, and he was a big enough name that he could sell out big... Yeah, but he could sell out big places, so I suspect he was doing a bit of that. But yeah, there's nothing like, oh yeah, that's what he was doing in between. Like the 80s for Rowan Atkinson is Blackadder, and then we move on to Mr. Bean.
Yeah, of course. Okay, well look, we've got ourselves right up to the first episode, so why don't we go into the first episode, Bells? The first episode of Blackadder 2, that's the one we're going to cover.
Well, can I just stop you there before we even go anywhere? Because Bells was not supposed to be the first episode of the series. Which makes a lot of sense because it's a terrible episode to start a series. Because
I was going to say that. There's a bad introduction to our characters. It doesn't start with our characters.
No, it does not. So the first two episodes were swapped around. So the second episode, which is Head, starts with Blackadder and Baldrick talking, and we establish that Baldrick's a fool. Percy comes in, and we go to Elizabeth, and it's perfect kind of set up these characters. Bells does not have that. But that decision was made quite late on. Let's swap these two. Just because they thought Bells is a stronger episode, we need to really hit the ground running here. So that's a big choice. And like I say, this is not a good opening.
I agree.
Our opening scene is a guest character who's going to be this. And if you were watching this first time round, you would assume that Bob is going to be a regular character
Yeah, you would.
in the show, and we're introducing them, and we're like, oh, it's that classic dynamic. You bring a new person into the world, and the audience, by proxy, gets to know everyone else. That is not what this is at all, but you would be sensible to assume that.
Yeah.
Before we get into that scene, should we do a touch on the opening credits?
Yeah, let's. So the opening credits are slightly different with each episode. So every episode's got a one-word title, and the opening credits end with, in this case, bells or head or whatever the title is. But it's basically a gloved hand. We're supposed to assume Edmund's hand, just trying to control a Blackadder.
Yes. Which it's basically a parody of the old I Clavdiv's opening themes, which was a snake kind of growing across mosaics. So that's kind of what it's playing on. So still, as we saw that's basically what the first series was doing. That whole thing, just kind of parodying it. Yeah. Those kind of sumptuous, dramatic histories. Yeah,
but the thing is, though, you said this earlier. You said the first Blackadder was, they were trying to ape those historical dramas. But I Clavdiv's is shaky sets, famously dodgy studio.
That's great. It's part of its charm. Really.
Oh, it is. I love it. I watched I Clavdiv's this year, actually. I really enjoyed it again. But Blackadder 2 is a lot more like it than Blackadder 1.
Yes, yeah, it is, actually. You're right there. I'll tell you what I really love about the opening credits, though, with the music. I think the music sets up the dynamic of the show really well, because it's the same theme from the original Blackadder. Howard Goodall wrote it, of course. But it's rearranged, and it's Elizabethan style. It's some sort of stringed instrument.
Harpsichord, is it not?
Or something. I don't know.
I don't know either.
But what happens about halfway through is that a very modern sounding electric guitar kicks in. That is the Blackadder 2. It's old-fashioned, but it's a little bit anarchic.
So is that not Edmund? Like, my contention here is that Edmund he's essentially a modern man. He's a man from 1986 who's been dropped into this Elizabethan setting. And he's got modern sensibilities and a modern eye, and he's just bewildered and frustrated by this archaic institution.
Yeah, I think there's a touch of that as well. I see that. But it's interesting that when Rowan Atkinson was out doing publicity for the show, doing, Wogan and stuff like that, they were really trying to big it up because the first series hadn't gone down that well. Yeah. But one of the things, I saw a quote of what he'd said that this series was going to be much more, and I quote, zappy and anarchic. So bear in mind, The Young Ones has just been the most groundbreaking sort of sitcom in 30 years. That's what they were getting, and they were like, okay, we're going to have, and we'll see it. We're going to talk about it in this episode. I mean, just Rick Mayall alone as an anarchic, powerhouse. So that's a big difference that they were bringing in, and that's kind of what you want. That's what you're expecting to get from Ben Elton, I think. And I just think the music of these opening themes just kind of really sets us up for that nicely.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So our opening scene then. Let's start the episode. We open not with our characters, but with Bob and her father in a cheap. It's supposed to be their hovel. It's a cheap little set.
It's a very simple window wall set, but it's obviously a side. But there's quite a few sets in this episode, so I had to just stick a little bit in the side.
But this is a nice little back and forth dialogue. It feels very Ben Elton, the writing. And, basically they've run out of money and he wants her to go, please become a prostitute. He wants her to go on the game. Yeah. It's kind of setting us up. She's going to go to London to find her fortune.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what else I like about this scene as well. We've got two actors here. And these two actors sum up what was going on with kind of casting at the time. So you've got Edward Dewsbury as the father there, who is just classically trained Shakespearean actor. He does pop up in comedies. He was in Yes Minister and stuff like that every now and then.
I think he's quite good, actually. He's in a couple of scenes, and he's good. He's got good timing. He delivers the lines well. He's good.
Brilliant comedy chops, right? And really, as we saw in the first series, they really went with those, let's get them proper dramatic Shakespearean actors, and then we kind of lends that credibility to it. So they're kind of gone with that. That's kind of one side of it. And then you've got Gabrielle Gleister, who was at school with Ben Elton.
I didn't know that.
So, and that's what's going on here. I think that just sums it up beautifully, because as we look through the rest of the cast for the series, and I heard John Lloyd talking about this. I think he was talking about more about this first series rather than this one, but basically what he was saying was, back then there wasn't like a big casting department at the BBC. You cast people that you knew, they were your mates, or people you'd seen in something and go, oh, they're good. I'll get in touch with their agent and get them in for an audition.
Yeah.
There wasn't like a kind of a good central focal way of doing it. So it was all about who he knew and a nudge and a wink.
Networking, Alan. It was all about networking.
Yeah.
Well, Gabrielle Gleister, I watched Upstart Crow last year, which was just,
Yes.
I sort of caught up on it. And she's in an episode of that, basically playing the same character.
Yes, I'm not sure how quite officially it's the same, but it is, and it's the same time period, or it's it's a bit further on.
Exactly.
So I think
exactly. She's obviously 20 years older, 30 years older. Hang on, she's obviously 40 years older. but no, she's essentially doing the same thing. She's playing a female character, passing as male.
And they do it in the correct way. It's not just a stupid cameo. The episode is about a woman pretending to be a man, and so it's kind of all tied in with that. She does crop up again in series 4 of Blackadder, again as a woman who's pretending to be a man in the army in the First World War. So again there it's tied in because that episode is about George being a female impersonator, and it kind of all makes sense. It's there.
So what else has she done? When I saw her in Upstart Crow, I recognised her immediately, and I realised I haven't seen you for 40 years. What the hell else has she done?
Well, not a lot. Like, no, that's not fair. A lot of work, but in terms of like sitcom that I could put her on, like not the odd guest appearance. She was in like Get Well Soon, for example, which we watched a while back. But soaps. She was in Brookside for like 7 years or something like that in the 90s. She's done a few spells in Coronation Street and other soaps and stuff like that.
Okay,
that
explains that.
Worked very consistently and still does, and has just had a good solid career. Still, anyone meets her goes, "Oh, Bob." So, well, that's okay. Legacy for you.
Can I talk in this scene? Can I talk a little bit about what I'm going to generously call an homage?
Okay.
There's a line where she says, "Mother's not dead; she's alive and well and living with someone else." And there's a line from Peter Cook, a Pete and Dud sketch, where Peter Cook says almost exactly the same thing. Your mother is alive and well and living with a sailor in Frinton.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
And it like when I heard it, I was like, oh yeah, and I've heard that before somewhere. And
Kate, for the final time, your mother is not dead. She's run off with your Uncle Henry.
Dear father, no one can only say such things to comfort me.
Your mother is alive and well and living in Droitwich.
Rosie, did we in our moment of joy spawn this werewolf, this Beelzebub?
I don't know why you keep looking upwards when you mention Mother. You know perfectly well she's living in Frinton with a sailor.
I'm going to generously call that an homage rather than a copy.
I'm not that familiar with Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, I'll be honest, but I bet Richard Curtis and Ben Elton were. I bet they were. So that can't be, unless it's just subconsciously seeped in. That's got to be just a little. Oh, we'll drop a little line in. And if it's just one line here and there, that's okay, isn't it? But yeah, that's interesting to pick up on that. I didn't get that. There's quite a lot of Shakespearean lines that get paraphrased and kind of used here. There is a real direct line here from this to Upstart Crow.
Yes, very much so.
It's
very much so.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're not reviewing Upstart Crow here. But I think one of the things I liked about that was they took a Shakespeare play and they didn't do that thing that comedies do of, aping the plot and making their own version of it. But they kind of incorporated it into the writing. I liked the way that they used Shakespeare's work in Upstart Crow.
Yeah, I agree. So let's move on to the next scene, and we actually get our proper characters.
Yeah, so now we get our introduction to the characters. So we're in Blackadder's living room. He's practicing his archery.
Yes.
And he has Baldric holding the target against the door.
It's always good to do archery from a distance of about 2.5 feet. That's always a good way of doing it.
Well, I mean, we talked when we did Ghosts. We talked about how health and safety has improved in the last 40 years. So certainly, if you go back further than that, there was a lot left to be desired.
Yeah, certainly Baldric's health and safety considerations are not not a jot to Sir Edmund Blackadder.
So it's interesting you saying about this wasn't originally the opening episode, because I think this is a terrific introduction to look at our new Blackadder. So number one, he is using Baldric. He is using him as a beast of burden and has no care for his safety at all. And number two, he hits the bullseye. Like, he's successful, he's good, he knows what he's doing. He's in control.
Yes, indeed. And so Percy comes in, and we get a bit of repartee between them. This is just banter. It does sort of establish their characters. It's not particularly plot relevant. All this stuff is happening before Bob enters.
And who is Jane?
I'm sworn to secrecy. Torture me, kill me, you shall never know. Oh, Jane Harrington! We are very much in love, my lord.
This is the Jane Harrington.
Yes.
Jane, bury me in a Y-shaped coffin, Harrington.
Well, it establishes Percy as this sort of lovelorn, lovesick fool, and Edmund, in contrast, is cynical and not interested in women and just uses them for his own sick, perverted desires.
Yeah, he essentially ends with him saying, "You'd never catch me falling in love. Enter Bob." So you know
exactly.
But then it's a lovely bit. I'm working very hard, and I'm sure you're doing the same, to not just quote a load of lines.
No, I am. I totally bury me in a Y-shaped coffin. I'm not saying that. I'm self-consciously not saying it.
Because, I've seen these episodes about 20 times. And I think when it came to like really making notes about the episode and analysing it, I think that was a problem, because it's all just, I'm taking this for granted. Like what? Whereas I think we did like No Job for a Lady. We were like, okay, we're going to have to explain to people what this is and who's in it. And I think
I'm sort of working on the assumption that, like when we did the other one, you're sort of assuming most of our listeners won't have seen this. I am assuming that every single person listening to this podcast has seen this episode.
Yeah, you better.
Like we had this when we did Red Dwarf. As with Red Dwarf, Blackadder 2 was, I had a VHS cassette, I'd recorded them off the telly, and I watched them 100 times.
Yeah. Back they didn't have no internet back then. There weren't any streaming.
We didn't have TikToks.
We had 6 VHS tapes, and you've got what you got.
So anyway, so we're trying not to just quote this. But what I do want to say here is that we are seeing Rowan Atkinson in character as this new character, this new Blackadder, and his line delivery is so good. Like obviously Ben Elton is writing these lines for him, but then do you think Rowan Atkinson could kind of deliver any line in that style? Couldn't he? You know, just the way that he says, "Okay, I'm going to do a line." When Baldric says the arrow didn't go in his body, it went in his willy, and he says, "Oh, it can be your lucky willy." Just the way he delivers that line is so perfectly Rowan Atkinson.
Not to worry, my lord, the arrow didn't in fact enter my body.
Ah, good.
No, by 1,000 to 1 chance my willy got in the way.
Extraordinary.
Yeah, I'd only just put it there, but now I will leave it there forever.
Quite so, Baldric. It can be your lucky willy.
See also Bob, the way he says Bob for the rest of the half hour.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, obviously they used the name Bob deliberately, but Rowan Atkinson probably says the word Bob 12 times in this episode, and it's funny every time.
It is. And I've seen, so if it's 12 times, I've seen it 1,200 times, and it's still funny.
And that is Rowan Atkinson's skill as a performer. Perhaps this is a good opportunity to talk about the rehearsal space and how they kind of really pulled this together. Because we know, and I think there's no surprise to anyone, that Rowan Atkinson is a bit of a perfectionist, and he's a comedy scientist. He's not a funny man like in his real life. He's a very boring and kind of, I am going to be meticulous and scientific about how a joke is crafted and how it works, as opposed to, I don't know, let's say Rick Mayall, who is just funny bones, right?
He's an architect, not a designer.
Yeah. And so the rehearsal room for the Blackadders, basically, you know, the writers drop off the script, and then the actors all just, not rip it apart, but they are trying to wring every single drop of anything out of it. And it's about getting every single word perfectly. Like, okay, I could say hamster here, but what if I said gerbil? Is that funnier? And then they have a 3-hour discussion about that.
Yes.
And that comes with benefits and disadvantages. So I know for a fact Ben Elton would walk away after a while. He couldn't just keep dealing with that. But Richard Curtis was in the room a whole time defending the script because, they're happy to have a bit of push and pull, but you need to be able to push back a little bit and go, hang on, we want to keep this line because of this. Yeah. We're doing this. If you change this, it has a knock-on effect here later and all that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about this later on when we do future series, but I think that was kind of what tore them apart in the end and meant they couldn't do it anymore because it was just that. I think it was all getting a bit too tense. Yeah. But we'll come to that later. At this point, it was a kind of still a melting pot. In fact, Tony Robinson tells a story in his book about how and this is in the first series rather than the second, but that they would spend so much time just crafting a script and working on it. They weren't really rehearsing the scenes and doing them that much. And so for other actors, some slightly more classically trained actors who were coming in, were like, what's going on here? Why aren't we doing the scenes? Why aren't we doing this properly? We're going to be not ready. And in fact, again, Tony Robinson in his book, he tells that Wilfred Bramble was supposed to be playing some sort of lord, and walked out after 2 days. He said, "You're the most unprofessional people I've ever worked with."
Well, because there's a script, just get on with it.
Yeah, and Wilfred Bramble wants to do the lines, get the blocking down, get to the pub. That's what he wants to do. Yeah. And
give
they're
him a
pissing
beer
about
money,
trying to make it better.
Yeah. That's great.
And you can see how that would be infuriating to the old guard actors who are just coming in to do 6 lines. But for our main cast, they're all in that room and they're pulling this thing apart. And I think it gets worse later on because you introduce Hugh Laurie as well. And then by the time you got the 4th series, Tim McInerney's back in. And these are all people who are successful, not just successful comedy performers, but successful comedy writers, Fry and Laurie as well.
They've all got an opinion. They've all got a good opinion.
That's it. That's the problem. They've all got a good opinion. And so you have to respect it kind of. The good thing was that everyone got on really well, and it was a really positive and productive environment. And it's why the show is so good. It's why the show is so dense. Every word counts, and you really feel that.
Well, let's jump back into that scene. So Bob's come in, asked for a job, and he immediately sacks Baldrick. You can replace Baldrick, and there's quite a sad little scene. Baldrick's genuinely sad. I've been in your service since I was 2.5, which is quite sweet. Tony Robinson is good in this. He's a very good actor. Yeah. But there's also, we talked about the character of Percy, and this is a nice intro to him as well. He's so desperate to be liked by everybody, not just Blackadder, but everybody. And he's like, oh, this new person, Bob. And he said, do you fancy a game of cup and ball? He's just keen to, he just wants to be liked.
Because he's looking at it was like, oh, it's a 15-year-old boy. I know how to talk to you old roister doister you. I'm older and I'm senior. He's going to look up to me. And then just doesn't at all. But fascinating performance here by Gabriel Gleinster, who is playing Bob. No attempt at all to be masculine in any way, really.
I think it's a very theatrical performance. And what I mean by that is she's overacting. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt that she's acting as a character who is overacting, if you see what I mean. Yes, definitely. It's a really good performance. I think it's really interesting.
And of course, we're playing into Shakespearean stuff here, like we've already been talking about. Every Shakespeare play basically has a woman dressing up as a man or vice versa, and it's hilarious. Yeah. And of course, in Shakespearean times, it would have been a man playing a female character who is dressing up as a man. So there's kind of these whole mass layers with hilarious comedy.
That's why it's so funny.
But that's also why you got to go big and sort of silly with it. But, there's absolutely not convincing that this is supposed to be a man or even a fairly young adolescent boy. And not even doing the voice or anything.
What interests me is that obviously Baldrick and Percy fall for it. Mm-hmm. She says she's a boy, so she's a boy. Mm-hmm. Whereas Edmund doesn't. Like, it takes him a little while to figure it out, obviously. But he's like, hang on a minute, this is not, he fancies her.
He knows something's not quite right.
And then later on, to jump ahead, when Baldrick's dressed up as a bridesmaid, Percy comes in and thinks, oh, it's a bloke in a dress, but he just assumes it's a woman because he's thick, and that's the point. Edmund, even though it is obvious to us as the audience, Edmund's the only person in world who can see through this obvious fiction.
But even he is not quite. He's just there's something about here. But let's contrast that with series 4, where we have the same setup. Bob is a woman who dressed up as a man to serve in the war, and she meets Blackadder. And Blackadder just immediately goes, "What are you doing? You're not a man. You're the worst male impersonator since insert comedy simile here." Yeah. So that's the difference, I guess, in series 2 and 4. Because in series 4, everyone else falls for it and they're fools. Whereas in series 2, he falls for it as well. But only just. He knows something's not quite right because there's something about that Bob who's really, really working for him.
Thank you so much for letting me stay, Lord Blackadder.
No, not at all, Bob. I'm looking forward to having you. Having another man about the house instead of that animal Baldric. Excuse me, I'm just going to the lavatory.
How little he knows, and how much I would have him know.
Okay, so let's step into our next scene and see the rest of our characters, our new characters.
We go into the palace.
Yeah, and the throne room, bizarrely, even smaller than Blackadder's house.
Can we talk? We haven't really talked about the sets in particular here, but this set in particular is very cheap.
It's all gold, but it is small, and we'll see at the end when we have a wedding scene. They've got like 7 characters in there. It's a bit of a squeeze. Yeah, and I think that was just a budget thing. The reason they got the second series was like, yeah, we can do it for however cheap you want it, we'll do it. And also, just to quickly speak of the director, Mandy Fletcher, who was brought in to do this series. We've talked about her before, because she's just been around she directed the last couple of specials of Miranda, for example. She did a lot of stuff with French and Saunders over the years. But this was kind of relatively early on in her directing career. Yeah. But you notice when we talk about the rehearsal room and all that, John Lloyd is there as the producer, the writers are there, and there's no mention of the director. Anytime these guys are talking about their experiences and like that, Mandy Fletcher is never mentioned. And I think this is a case where, back in the days, it was like produced by, Harold Snowd or whoever, and like they're the kind of de facto director as well. In this case, we've got John Lloyd, who's the kind of the producer.
We call them showrunners now.
Yeah, and he's like the creative director in that. Mandy Fletcher is running the cameras, doing the tech side. Okay, how are we going to film this? In the gallery, cut to camera 1 now, all that kind of stuff. Whereas I'm not sure they were quite in the room. And I think we see that less and less back in the day. The director is doing the physical directing. And that's why we so often see the writers in the rehearsal room, because they're the big creative element. Yes. Galton and Simpson and Dick Clement and Ian LaFrennay and all these kind of people, they were always in the rehearsal room. And I think in this case, John Lloyd is there as well. He's like the sort of de facto acting director. Mm-hmm. But Mandy Fletcher, she does say that they filmed this as close to possible as live. And so they didn't want to have to kind of, take 10 while we construct another set. They're trying to fit everything in this one space, do as much as possible without messing about, get a nice smooth flow as if it's what the audience is watching a play. And so I think that's also partly why the sets are as small as possible. They're just squamming everything into one stage and kind of making it work. Well, that's all we've got time for this week, I'm afraid, but do come back next time where we will continue our look through the episode and get into all the other actors that we haven't talked about yet and all that. So do please come back for that, and in the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch, we are on social media at BritcomPod. We're on Facebook, there's a group there, search for British Sitcom History Podcast, that's where most people make comments and discuss the shows we're looking at. Thank you so much for listening, do come back next time, and goodbye.